Tonight, when you walk into a building, you don't think twice about the ground beneath it. You trust it. You assume it was simply poured or stacked or built. But for thousands of years, across dozens of cultures, the ground beneath a structure wasn't just trusted, it was paid for. Sometimes with an animal, sometimes with a coin, and sometimes, according to legend and a disturbing amount of archaeology, with something far worse. This is the story of foundation sacrifice, the belief that a structure needs a life, or the symbol of one, buried inside it before it can stand. Where did this idea come from? And why does it keep showing up again and again in cultures that never spoke to each other? Let's start with what your brain already knows, even if you've never said it out loud. New buildings feel unstable to you. A house that's just been built feels less trustworthy than one that stood for 50 years. Ancient builders felt that instability too, but they didn't have engineering reports or stress tests. What they had was fear, and fear needed an explanation. Across early human civilization, the ground was not neutral. It was alive. Spirits lived in soil, in rivers, in stone. To dig into the earth and build something permanent was, in many belief systems, an act of violence against whatever already lived there. So builders made an offering, a kind of payment to the earth, asking permission to stay. In the earliest cases, this meant animals. Archaeologists have found the skeletons of oxen, dogs, and chickens buried beneath foundations in sites stretching from the Near East to East Asia. A buried animal was a small, controlled sacrifice. It satisfied the spirits without costing the builders very much. But not every culture stopped there. In southeastern Europe, oral traditions speak of master builders who could not finish their work no matter how many times they tried. Walls would collapse overnight. Towers would crack before completion. The folklore is consistent across Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Albania, which is strange because these regions didn't always share language or religion. In each version of the story, the builder eventually realizes the structure demands something living. Often, it is his own wife, walled into the foundation, her cries audible for days as the stone closes around her. These are framed as legends, folk songs, not historical records, but here is the unsettling part. When archaeologists have excavated medieval fortresses tied to these legends, some have found human remains positioned at foundation corners, not in graves, not with burial rites, just sealed into the structure itself. Were these murders disguised as construction? Executions repurposed as ritual? Or sacrifices made with willing, even desperate, participants? Historians still argue. What's harder to argue with is the pattern. The belief that something living had to be given to the ground showed up far beyond the Balkans. In ancient China, foundation deposits have been uncovered beneath city walls and palace platforms dating back over 3,000 years. Some contain jade, some contain bronze vessels, and in a number of significant excavations, archaeologists have found human skeletons deliberately placed beneath the foundations of structures from the Shang dynasty. Researchers studying these sites have noted that the individuals were often bound or positioned in ways inconsistent with standard burial, suggesting they were placed there specifically as part of the construction process, not buried afterward out of respect. In medieval England, a different but related fear took hold. Builders of churches sometimes buried small offerings, coins, animal bones, even shoes beneath thresholds and foundation stones. The shoe, oddly enough, was believed to trap evil spirits that might try to enter through the doorway. It sounds almost gentle compared to what came before, but the underlying logic is identical. A new structure is vulnerable. Something must be sacrificed, symbolically or literally, to protect it. Why does this pattern repeat across cultures with no contact with each other? Psychologists who study ritual behavior point to something called terror management theory, developed by researchers Sheldon Solomon, Jeff Greenberg, and Tom Piszczynski in the late 20th century. Their experiments showed that when people are reminded of death, even briefly, they cling more tightly to symbolic structures, religion, nationalism, ritual, anything that suggests permanence in the face of mortality. A building is exactly this kind of structure. It is meant to outlast you. And to make something outlast you, some part of the human mind seems to demand that mortality itself be paid into it first. There's a darker layer here too. In hierarchical societies, sacrifice was rarely random. The people buried beneath foundations were almost never kings or priests or wealthy landowners. They were slaves, prisoners, foreigners, or, in the Balkan legends, wives, the most disposable members of a household in a deeply patriarchal world. The sacrifice wasn't really a gift to the earth. It was a transfer of risk. The powerful built their permanence on the backs of the powerless, then told themselves a story about spirits and stone to make it feel sacred instead of cruel. This is where the story stops being about ancient superstition and starts becoming about something closer to home. Because this pattern, sacrificing the vulnerable to secure the comfort of the powerful, didn't end with Bronze Age city walls. Historians studying the construction of major infrastructure projects, railways, dams, bridges throughout the 19th and 20th centuries have documented worker death tolls that were treated as acceptable losses rather than tragedies. The Hoover Dam alone is estimated to have killed around 100 workers during its construction in the 1930s, and for decades a myth persisted that some of them were entombed inside the concrete itself. That part isn't true, but the myth surviving says something. People wanted to believe the building demanded blood because, in a sense, the human cost felt too large to be explained any other way. So ask yourself this. When a tall building goes up today, when a stadium or a tower or a bridge is completed ahead of schedule, do you ever wonder what corners were cut to get it there? Whose safety was treated as expendable so the structure could rise faster, cheaper, taller? We don't bury bodies in foundations anymore. We don't need to. The sacrifice has just become less visible. Underpaid labor, ignored safety violations, lives quietly spent so something permanent can stand. Maybe that's the real reason foundation sacrifice legends refuse to die out. Not because ancient people were uniquely brutal, but because the trade they made out loud is one we still make in silence. A structure rises, something or someone pays for it. We've just gotten better at hiding the receipt. So tonight, when you walk into a building and feel that quiet sense of safety beneath your feet, remember what that feeling has always cost throughout human history. The ground was never neutral. It still isn't. You just stopped asking what's buried beneath it.